We are here today with Professor Darryl Flaherty, University of Delaware, Crossroads class of 1985. Darryl is a professor of Japanese studies and other East Asian studies, University of Delaware, as we said, and wrote a book about legal practices, public arena, private arena, profit, lots of different things going on in the 19th century in Japan. Darryl, tell us a little bit about your book, please.
Sure. Um, the book started, I mean, this is sort of an extension or continuation of our earlier conversation, Arthur, but the book started in the early 20th century. I mean, in my mind, I went to Japan and my intention was to write a history of civic society, civil society in Japan, and look at groups of folks not at the sort of from the bottom up, like labor unions or peasant rebellions, which have been studied widely in Japanese history, and not from the top down. There's this image of the oppressive state, also in Japanese history for the late 19th and early 20th century, but rather to think how have people in the middle, and when I think about the middle, I mean people who have some resources, maybe they have some literacy, maybe they have some skills, how have they resolved conflict over time? And how have they shaped Japanese society and law and politics? And so um, the book, yeah, again, the sort of project began looking at the early 20th century and looking at a number of different kinds of groups. And then gradually I sort of pushed it back into the 19th century. So I started out looking at folks who were working at mid-level in the government, newspaper reporters, lawyers, all kinds of folks that we might think of as the middle class in the early 20th century Japan. And I began to look more and more at lawyers because, one, they were interesting to me because they were really on the front lines of change. But also, as I began to study them more and more, I saw that there wasn't much of a history of what was happening in the going back into the Tokugawa period, which is the period from 1600 to 1868. And so if you think about that period, that's when there were shoguns. That's when samurai were walking around on the street with their hair shaved back to here and two swords. And so just about as different, if you're thinking about, similarity and difference across different cultures, that's about as different as you can get from a European idea of society. But at the same time, my book suggests that we can see similar practices in early modern Japan, which is what historians call the Tokugawa period, and early modern Europe. So it's not so different, is one of the things that I argue in the book.